Well, good Friday. My name is Ron Williams. I'm the CEO of Talon Companies, which consists of three companies. Talon Executive Services, which is the first company that I founded. We protect people of high net worth, celebrities, and we also investigate threat mitigation for stalkers and people who are making threats in the workplace. We do corporate investigations under that company when people are engaged in drugs or theft of funds. We also do background and due diligence work for a vast number of clients. And we do event planning and security. Our second company is Talon Cyber Tech LLC, formed to meet the ever-increasing spiking issue of cybercrime and cyber fraud. And our third company is Secure Strategies International, which is a consulting company primarily dealing with security risk vulnerability assessments, emergency response planning, and security consulting. This morning, I have a very special guest and a partner in Nautilus Global Solutions. Her name is Ardelle St.George, Esquire. Let me tell you a little bit about Ardelle. She has a very extensive bio. I'm not going to read all of it because it's an amazing bio. But she earned a Juris Doctorate degree and a master's degree in business administration from the University of San Diego. Ardelle St. George also has earned a certification in cybersecurity, digital transformation, and artificial intelligence. Her completion of the pilot course and certification in January 2021 is from the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy, the Harvard Engineering School, and Harvard Applied Computer Science School. Ardelle established and is the managing and named partner of a corporate and intellectual property law firm, St. George and Carnegie, and the president and CEO of an international solutions and licensing company, Nautilus Global Solutions, LLC. Ardelle has been serving as a general counsel and corporate secretary for international consortiums consisting of major Fortune 50 companies, Lockheed, Boeing, BAE, Rockwell, Collins, Honeywell, IBM, Ford Aerospace, and others. Government agencies such as NASA, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, U.S. Army, and also serves as counsel to the Public Broadcast System and the National Educational Telecommunications Association and its 277 member stations. So her bio and resume goes on and on and on. Ardelle is well known here in Orange County, California. She was once the president of the Association of Corporate Growth here in Orange County. And I got to know her through the Association of Corporate Growth. We've known each other for over 10 years, and I have nothing but the utmost respect for Ardelle. So Ardelle, welcome to the program. We're going to be discussing today cyber security, governance, and laws. This is Talon Cyber Tech has merged and converged with physical security, cyber IT security, and governance. And governance is an ever-changing roadmap. It changes daily and weekly on the laws regarding cybersecurity. So with that, Ardelle, Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing. Tell us where you think that the cyber governance is going. And obviously, we have a real problem today in our society with cyber hacking, and it's the number one issue in the security world. So, with that, I turn it over to you, Ardelle, and tell us a little bit about what you perceive as new governance laws and the laws that may affect cybersecurity in the future.
It's my pleasure, Ron, and thank you so much. It's such a delight to be on your show this morning and also to work with you. I'll be talking a little bit about that, but this is such an important issue today in our society, for the economy, for companies and organizations alike. It's such a critical factor. Cybersecurity is just becoming an essential tool that every CEO and every company and organization must consider as top priority. I thought what I would do, Ron, is talk a little bit about my background in the context of where I came to the cybersecurity front, and basically why this has really become such an important issue for all of us today. First of all, I had started my career, as you had so aptly mentioned, and thank you, in the aerospace and the defense industry. I had actually worked with General Dynamics, both at the division level and then on a corporate-wide level. I was part of the corporate legal team back in St. Louis in the day, and then Washington, D.C. I worked in every department you could imagine, from procurement to engineering, from facilities to technology modernization. So I really got to see the ins and outs of what is behind not just our defense industry, but every company and its infrastructure, and really, where we are today, and what needs to be done. Some of the products I had the opportunity to really witness being manufactured from the manufacturing floor were even cruise missiles and satellites, tanks, fighter jets, nuclear submarines, all the commercialized type products like semiconductors. There were many different areas of intellectual property and intellectual property assets that I actually became a part of. I was the general counsel of our data systems division at General Dynamics, and I handled all of the transactional work of General Dynamics throughout all of their divisions, all the way up through M&A activity, divestiture, whatnot. So I really got to see, Ron, the ins and outs of where do we stand in terms of infrastructure, vulnerabilities, and why it's so important that our governance and compliance is really intact and a part of the process and practice that all companies and organizations follow today. So what we're going to talk about a little bit more is about that governance and compliance, basically how we all fit together in this puzzle and really working forward. A little bit about why it's important, the information privacy and practice. We'll talk about the governance and compliance itself, the law, and why is this important to all these organizations and companies out there today. As I mentioned, I had the good fortune of working in the corporate law department at General Dynamics, as well as handling all of the intellectual property for the corporation and many of the successor companies as well. I also had the opportunity to work at a very large international law firm, Bryan Cave, where we actually had the international aspect and growth opportunity to really research out as part of the outside counsel structure. So I've seen this from both sides, in-house and outside as well. And as we call it sometimes, the outhouse side. So I then ventured off to the West Coast, and General Dynamics asked me to become the West Coast General Counsel. And I therefore ended up with my own practice in St. George and Carnegie. You mentioned that I also have a solutions and licensing company where you and I work together. And that is basically an opportunity to handle cybersecurity solutions, really delving into the technology that's available today. And working with companies like CrowdStrike and ActiveCipher and Cytelix, companies that are on the pulse of organizations that need this technology. And by the way, I was really fortunate to work with George Kurtz, who started the company of CrowdStrike, as we basically ventured into his sale of his original company, Foundstone, when he sold it to McAfee. So there's really been an evolution of where we stand from security all the way through to cybersecurity today, through the intellectual property area, and seeing it through many eyes. One of my roles also really encompassed, I was general counsel and corporate secretary of an international standards consortium. It was known as PDAS, which handled the manufacturing standards for many of the commercial and defense companies that you know today. General Motors, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, British Aerospace, and many vendor companies. We had IT companies like IBM and Dassault, and also government agencies like the Army, the Navy, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology, otherwise known as NIST. And we all may know that from their NIST cybersecurity framework. So I've really looked at the cybersecurity aspects, front, back, inside out, and really seeing why this is so important in all aspects, commercial, government, defense, in every environment. So I thought what I would do, Ron, is just mention very quickly a little bit about your great background as being part of the Secret Service, and also what we determined was probably the most helpful to companies and organizations today. We've put together our own alliance, and we call it the Cyterion Elite Alliance. And of course, we venture into a holistic cybersecurity area where we're presenting solutions, licensing opportunities, technology, governance and compliance, identification assessment that you're doing from your perspective of cyber attacks, risk management, as we join in Steve Paulin from our Orion Risk Management, part of the Alera Group risk management company. And so we've really looked at this as a composite of cybersecurity, defense, governance and compliance, and risk management through our alliance, the Cyterion Elite Alliance. And we are all part of the Secret Service Cyber Task Force. You've helped my introductions there, and as well as the FBI InfraGard. And I know you're all doing work as well through some of the other agencies in the government, whether they be CIA or Homeland Security. With our security clearances, and I have a few myself, and with my certifications that you mentioned from Harvard, I think I'm completely ready for this cybersecurity approach and how we're addressing this and what we're doing. So I thought what we could do now is talk a little bit about the information on the basics of information privacy and protection. Let's start kind of on the basics and really address, why is this so important to everyone, and what are we really trying to address through our cybersecurity approach? Well, information privacy, it's also known as data privacy, and even data protection laws, they provide the legal framework on how to obtain, use, and store data of individuals. The right of kind of the legal framework also includes the right to obtain and handle the information from individuals. But we also have an obligation. We have to explain, why are we using this? What's the purpose that it's being used for? And even the ability to give to the individuals a right to request the ability to delete certain information and or to basically edit it, to redact it, to make changes to it. Anything that may be used by companies, by organizations, or even the government. And I think go ahead, Ron. It's important to note as well that this is an obligation not just for for-profit companies, but also for not-for-profit companies who are dealing with quite a bit of information from donors, from members, and from other individuals that we deal with every day. And everyone that is responsible for handling this information has to follow data protection principles and ensure that the information is handled fairly, lawfully, and transparently. Many of us don't even realize that our information is being passed back and forth, even invisibly to us. And we need to take advantage and responsibility of the opportunities that the laws grant us to be able to address and protect our data information. You had mentioned, Ron, about governance and compliance. What is that really?
Ardelle, there was a glitch in the system. Can you go back?
Sure. What do you guys need? Am I off now?
Hey, Ron, everybody heard her. So if you just want to answer her question about compliance.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Could I put
Go
one?
ahead.
Brian, cut this.
Go ahead.
Okay. So my question was, did you want to ask me, since we're focused on governance and compliance, Ron, do you want to just ask me, well, what is governance?
There's standards set by Europe. I think it's called GPDS or something like that. But the California Consumer Protection Act was initiated in January of this year and sets standards for cybersecurity. So would you like to expound on the California Consumer Protection Act and also any new laws that you see coming on down the pike that will strengthen cybersecurity?
Absolutely, Ron. And as I mentioned that, let's talk about why those laws that you just mentioned are so important. Compliance, just as a basic concept, is actually the application of really a practice. We're trying to meet a company or organization's regulatory, as you mentioned, with GDPR, or contractual insurance requirements. And cybersecurity compliance involves really meeting kind of various contractual controls, regulatory controls. They might be established by law, by industry groups, by regulatory authorities that are there to protect the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of data. And that's really the essence of those laws that you're speaking to. And the controls may come from a variety of sources. That can include some standards that we've talked about, and we can address those in a moment. But basically, our main goals are addressing the cybersecurity governance programs in accordance with those laws that you're talking about. So let's get into the specific laws just for a moment. You mentioned the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, and that comes to us from Europe. This is actually the first and the most comprehensive, sometimes considered even the most important law that has been established in this area. GDPR is really based on a person's right to privacy, and it governs the collection, the use, basically the transmission, and as we've discussed, the security of data that's collected from residents of any of the 28 member countries of the European Union or the EU. So that's really the essence of GDPR. It's coming to us from Europe, and it really does protect those residents of those countries. Well, you might say, well, who does it really apply to then? And why do I care in the United States? Well, the law applies to all EU residents, regardless of wherever the entity's location is. So your company could be in the United States, but if you're collecting personal data of someone who came from any of those countries in the EU, GDPR actually does reach out to you and does apply to you even as a company in the United States. It's designed to protect the personal data of those individuals, no matter where they're located. And it may even apply to a business or organization, even if you don't have employees or if you don't even do business in the EU. So keep in mind, the fines can be significant, up to 20 million euros, or even 4% of your global turnover may be imposed on organizations that fail to comply with GDPR. So we need to take note of what's involved. And without going into a lot of detail, there are requirements like consent, It has to be explicit and unambiguous. You've got to basically provide data breach notifications. Organizations have to notify supervisory authorities and data subjects, that's the individual who gave you the data, within 72 hours in the event of a data breach. And I'm going to mention in a few minutes about risk management. If you don't follow that requirement properly, you might not get your insurance coverage that actually helps you with your risk mitigation.
Can I ask you a question, Ardelle?
Sure.
What is the difference between the European standards and California Consumer Protection Act and the California breach law that was enacted in 2003 under SB 1386 to protect identities? Are we overstacking the law, or is it does the California Consumer Protection Act supplant our previous breach laws, or do they seamlessly fit together?
Well, it's interesting, Ron, you bring up such a good point, because the laws in the United States are really disparate. They basically don't unify under a federal law. So what you're going to have is an amalgamation of state and other specific types of data law. So for example, what you mentioned, the California law is very important. It follows a lot of what's in the GDPR, and it's just for clarification, it's the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA. And there is also an amendment to that, which we can talk about. But as well, we also have laws that are specific to credit data. As you mentioned, identification. We have healthcare laws, and we have other laws that are very specific. But actually, and possibly to the surprise of many people, there really are no federal privacy laws. Unlike the GDPR, which actually is a privacy law, there really are not federal privacy laws. So it's either
Why is that? Why is that? Because it seems to me that we're not going to get standardization of our governance and laws unless the federal government mandates a program that is similar to the European. I mean, I don't understand why the federal government has not. I'm not. Trust me, I'm not a big government guy, even though I spent 23 years in the Secret Service. But for the most part, I want the federal government to stay out of our personal lives. But when it comes to data protection, we now know that Russia and China have feasted off of our major technology companies and stolen data that is essential to our military and complex and even the medical field. So the federal government, in my estimation, should take a more aggressive approach to establishing a standard law that would mirror the Europeans.
I think you're going to have a lot of agreement in the legal community on that, Ron. There are a lot of attorneys, including myself, that feel it's time. You know, we have a national framework for identification, detection of threats, as you know, the NIST framework, and we have other standards. But there really is no standard law. And I think the federal government has left it to the states in many considerations. And even the state laws are not consistent. You mentioned one of the strongest laws, which is actually one of the first state laws, the California CCPA, which has also been amended now to make it even stronger. But there are other states out there as well that do have some laws that aren't as strong. There's some states that are still in committee with their laws, and many of them don't have that data protection. So you're absolutely right. In this case, Europe is definitively ahead of the United States in terms of overall unified data protection and data privacy protection. But also in California, we do have some protection, but it's not privacy protection as you might think. So the CCPA does provide a significant, I would say, step forward. It's progress in the data protection laws, but it's not quite there yet in terms of privacy protection and where we need to go. But at the same time, as I have been working with companies, especially international companies that deal with citizens from global regions, they have to comply with all of these different regulations, and it's quite confusing. We've just put some policies together for an international logistics and transportation company that I'm working for, and we've had to deal with Canadian laws, the GDPR, California, there are laws in Virginia that you need to start complying with now. Colorado now has some new regulations, and there are quite a few other states that are coming together, and they're not all consistent. Many of them have varying rights, and you've got to be cognizant of them and really aware that you have an obligation to comply with them. So this is where governance and compliance is really key, and your policies and practices really have to be updated and kept current so that you're basically maintaining the protections for individual data and their privacy protection.
Well, it helps that some of the new laws are holding board members of publicly traded companies responsible for information and data protection, because now it forces C-level folks and board members to really delve in and put together a program that is compliant with governance and laws.
Absolutely,
cybersecurity.
You're absolutely right. I think that it has finally come to actually a very good opportunity for companies to take advantage of the resources of their boards. But it's important for the boards to understand that they have liability as well. And although CEOs and C-suite senior staff are responsible for really establishing, creating, enacting, and implementing your cybersecurity policies and practices, and they need to be on point when we have those incidents that do come up that you're so responsible for and really identifying for them so carefully. The boards also have a responsibility. As you know, Ron, under their governance and compliance obligations, boards have to have oversight over what is going on at the company. And if you look at the financial side, cybersecurity has a significant financial impact. If you actually look at the incidents themselves, the boards must make sure that they've agreed to and they have oversight over the plans that the CEOs and the senior staff are implementing during any type of incident, during any type of practice that the company is following. So,
can I weigh in on that real quick, though?
Yes.
Whenever we are tasked or talk to C-level people, CEOs and CFOs, about data security, one of the things they do is bring in their cybersecurity expert and security person, chief security officer. And they ask him, are we secure? And of course, he's going to say yes. That's why you need third-party review, though, because a lot of times, and I can cite many, many examples of insider threats generated by employees within the information system. And many times they are responsible for insider hacks. So you need third-party review simply for, to keep honest folks honest and really examine objectively the information systems owned by the company for several reasons. Number one, you don't know if you've got a bad egg working in your IT system, number one. Number two, if there's criminal or civil charges to be levied, you want somebody who's an expert as a third party to testify, because if the person works for the company and testifies, a defense attorney can always turn that around to say he represents the company, and therefore, i.e., he's going to slant any of the security issues in favor of the company. So I wanted to interject that because that's the role that I see us playing in the sandbox of cybersecurity, because we started Talent Cybertech LLC to converge cybersecurity with physical security, because you can't have one without the other, and governance, because they're all three interrelated. And we also emphasize insurance. My company has an insurance policy on cybersecurity, and that's really something that's needed in the industry. But I didn't mean to interject, but I wanted to explain our role in the cybersecurity industry.
No, it's so important, Ron, and I'm glad that you mentioned this is why we've taken such an integrated approach with our alliance on the holistic side. It really is a team effort internally and externally, and it's important that everyone be aware of what is needed. I've been talking a lot in the healthcare industry, in the manufacturing industry, and they're seeing how much impact this is having on their organizations and what is needed. And I think you're absolutely right. A third party objective assessment, evaluation, and ensuring that you've got all the right players involved is going to be critical. And you need that internal team, including your board, very aligned with the cybersecurity requirements, as well as your senior staff through the CEO level, really understanding what the vulnerabilities are and how your company and organization can protect against that. It's really critical that we're aware of all the applicable laws and regulations, and that we're prepared for the next cyber attack when it comes.
Ardelle, I'm going to have to wrap this up. It's been a very interesting session. I think there's a lot more to be said about the area of governance and laws. I think we've covered a lot of ground this morning, and I thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Ron. It was my pleasure.
In wrapping up, I just want to say that cybersecurity is a huge, cyber fraud, cyber hacking is a huge issue. Ransomware, all of those evil things that can happen to your system can cost thousands and millions of dollars to repair once you get hit. There's a book that I'm going to recommend that everybody that is on this podcast take the time to order from Amazon. The title of the book is The Perfect Weapon by David Sanger. It's a real eye-opener. It's a very good read, and it's very informative. And with that, thank you for listening to our podcast today, and have a good weekend.